Oh.
That's me.
The land is green. It's green. Oh. So I don't have to. I think when people try and join in a bit.
Just anybody
just
can join. Okay. Anybody can come. Bye-bye. I'll tell them to. So what you do now, once you see Iwi here and he does not request, press here. The list of everybody active, then you now send to me. Let me just play, let everything start first.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Iwi.
Hi, Wuraola.
Okay.
The network is breaking. I don't know why.
I thought it was yours.
I think it's fine now.
Is it better now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to our followers who are currently on board. Welcome. Hopefully we have more people join in. Welcome to the IG Live. This is Wuraola Kayode here from the IREDE Foundation. And here we have Bros Iwi. Only mostly called Bros. Joining the Instagram today. So you could wonder, why are we on today? So it's the International Youth Day across board globally, and we just thought, you know what, let's have a conversation on how this concerns persons with disability. So I would assume, or don't let me assume, that you guys following us know what the IREDE Foundation is. But basically, we're not for profit that focuses on everything disability, from child amputees to youth to teenagers, and also a bit of adults also living with disability. So today, being the International Youth Day, we thought we have this conversation, talk about the inclusion of youths, in particular with disability. Okay, so I would allow you to introduce himself before we get to it. So you blow your trumpet like how they do on LinkedIn. So the floor is yours.
My name is Iwi Iguodala. I am an amputee. I am a food scientist and nutritionist. I am a farmer, and I drive on one of the e-taxi hailing services. And when I'm not doing any of this, I'm at the IREDE Foundation, trying to make better the lives of child amputees.
Okay, so that's it. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, it's very true. When it's not at home, it's IREDE. I mean, look at me here with IREDE now. So thank you for gracing us with your time. Okay, so I'll just start off with what the theme for this year basically is. And every year for every international or global event, we have there's a theme that everybody uses globally, and so then you now have to now dissect it on how it affects your country or it affects you. So in our case, it's how does it affect persons with disability? So the theme here is transforming youth innovation for human and predatory health. Now, you recall that Iwi introduced himself as a food scientist, nutritionist. So we thought we could have this conversation by starting off with it. Iwi, as playing in this role that you currently and living this ambitious life and career that you have, how do you think that persons with disability and youth especially with disability can contribute into the overall theme for this year?
So first of all, I think if we start from contribution, we'll be placing the cart before the horse. I think we first need to identify that youth living with ability in Nigeria are somewhat disenfranchised in the sense that they do not have access to knowledge and skill sets. And I'll give an example. In Nigeria today, there is still a lot of primary schools who discriminate against persons with disability. So if you cannot gain primary school knowledge, for example, how then do you scale up to gain the necessary skill set required for you to transform the food system as it may be? Do you understand? And this translates to almost every sector within the Nigerian space at the moment. So first of all, we need to break that barrier of access to knowledge and information and skill sets. So when we address the issues surrounding knowledge, skill, and access to both, then we can then talk about how these individuals with these potentials can fit into transforming the food systems in Nigeria. If we jump straight to talking about how they can transform the food systems, then I think we'll be modeling things up and not really addressing the root cause of the problem. If you step out of your house today and you're stuck in traffic, a large percent of the people who come to you begging for alms are persons living with disability. Why is that? Because they do not have an option. You understand? They do not have the right skill set required in the job market. So without that skill set, they have no relevance to themselves and the society at large. So if we're talking about food transformation and these people do not have the right skill set, I mean, we can argue that some of them it's cultural or it's the way they are, but the reality is, do they have a choice? To a large extent, the answer is no, they do not have a choice, and that's why they found themselves where they are today. So we first of all need to address the issue of skill acquisition and gaining knowledge. Then we'll talk about how they can transform the food systems. But yes, youths with disability today who have that skill set and that knowledge can transform the food systems. When we talk about food systems, it's a very long chain from the farm to storage. And when I say it's farm, logistics to storage, logistics to processing, processing to end user, processing to storage. So along this food chain, if you're a person with disability, you can fit in anywhere. For example, I do food quality control systems for industrial kitchens. So I can do food hygiene, I can do food quality. And these are some of the things that youths living with disability, these are some of the skills that they can learn and they can then impute into transforming the food systems in Nigeria. But if they do not have places where they can gain these necessary skills, then they're shut out, they're left out. So I think, first of all, we need to address that and then look at the whole food chain from the production of raw materials, which is farming, to the end user. Any youth with a disability can fit in. From the farm, goods need to be moved to the warehouse, the silos, and to the processing plants. If you can drive a vehicle, you can move those goods. When it gets to the processing plants, you can do quality control, you can do processes, you can supervise workers who are converting maize to pap on an industrial scale. But so those are some of the ways that persons with a disability or youth with a disability can transform the food system. But then again, they have to first be equipped with skill and knowledge.
Okay, thank you so much. I hear two things. I hear access and I hear skill acquisition. And I also want to know, you said something personally that it's not just okay to just jump into this current conversation, but we have to go back to the grassroots. And I want to just chip into that. And I absolutely agree with you on going back to the grassroots. I mean, we talk about children with disability and also leveraging on access that you talked about. Now, the question is, for this access, and access can be education and, like you said, skill acquisition also. Is it accessible for children from the grassroots to actually attain this? So when people talk about the skills, going to go and get these skills, the structure, is it available? Transportation, mobility, is it even flexible for them to use? So at the end of the day, just like you said, it's really the grassroots before we start talking about these big numbers and this big dream.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so allow me to flip this the other way. So you know how when we talk about inclusion, we emphasize that for every activity or for every action, for every policy or framework that is made for persons with disabilities, it's important that they are participants in that room. So you're not just making decisions for them. And I'll give a very practical example to this. So, and I think it's something everybody can relate to. So you go to a restaurant today and they have a ramp. But the question is, when the person with disability comes, is that ramp usable? Now, the problem there was that from the get-go, when they started the architectural presentation for that, they didn't bring in a person with disability to give in their own feedback. So that's a very clear example of why it's important to have persons with disability in the space, from the planning phase to the design phase to the implementation of it also. It's important you have them there. So now my question to you now is, you've addressed persons with disability on how they can be participants and how they can contribute. Now, suppose we call you Iwi, Edwin, to come on board. The Ministry of Youth and Sports wants you. Ministry of Agriculture wants your consultancy to say, you know what, guys, we want to hear you. We want to see how we can bring persons with disability, youth with disability on board. What's your recommendation?
So, leaning on my first explanation, we need to give youths access to skills and knowledge. One of the skill acquisition centers across all the geographical zones in the country, first of all, dedicated specifically to persons living with disability, and enforcing that at primary school level, persons living with disability are carried along. They are allowed access to at least basic education, because it is from there that we can then start talking about skill. If they do not have access to the basics and you're jumping straight away to skill acquisition, then you might be jumping the gun. But if we ensure that at primary school level, across all state-owned institutions, children or persons with disability are allowed access, and we put tools in place. So it's one thing for you to just say this and we have that. You need to then put tools in place. You had mentioned earlier, travel from home to school. Is our society built in such a way that if I have a wheelchair, I can wheel myself from my house to my classroom without any hindrance? Is our society built that if I'm a person that is suffering with that's visibly impaired, is it easy for me to get to commute from my house to the bus stop, to get into a public transport system, and it drops me where I need to be, and then get to school? So these are some of the things that we need to address when we talk about accessing education, even at the primary school level. Then when we scale it up to skill acquisition across all geographical zones in the country, the government can then look at the food chain and say, you know what, we're going to provide XYZ courses. Like I mentioned, you can have food quality courses, for example, where somebody with a disability can say, you know what, I want to be an expert in quality control and food hygiene. I want to learn hazard analysis and critical control points. Or somebody with a disability can come in and say, you know what, I want to be an expert processor. Anything that has to do with bakery and flour, I want to be able to produce bread, all types of breads, all types of pastry, cakes. I want to be the top of the game. And they have access to that type of skill set across all geographical zones. I mean, it would have been easy for me to say in every local government in the federation, but I know that might be a big ask. But I mean, a step into it is to say, okay, across all geographical zones in the country, we have such training facilities where persons with disability can have access to and then gain such knowledge about, you know, different skill sets that you can have. And when you then go into the job market, those skill sets will be desirable enough for you to make money off and then live an independent quality life for yourself. So I would tell the government, quite very straightforward, just set up training institutes. And it is not just setting up training institutes. Now, again, we must understand that the disability space is very broad. So we have to accommodate everybody within the disability space. So when you talk about setting up training institutes, for example, if I am hard of hearing, is it that you are going to lecture me by only audio? If you lecture me by only audio, automatically you shut the door to me because I'm not going to learn. If I'm visually impaired and you're writing on the blackboard or the whiteboard, as the case may be, I'm not going to learn anything because I cannot see what you're teaching me. So we have to think about them when setting up that educational curricula. So we have to involve things like audio learning, visual learning, brailles, and etc., etc. I mean, it might look like a tough ask now, but I certainly believe that when there's a will, there's always a way.
Absolutely, thank you. So I'm picking two things here. Establishing a training institute that accommodates every person with disability, and also infusing these conversations into the curriculum for the grassroots. I also want to just chip into that. So you know how Nigeria currently adopts the charity model of interacting with persons with disability. So as opposed to providing these essentials that they need, it's okay, let's give them, is it people with disability, give them rice, give them meals. So that charity model is not sustainable.
It's not sustainable because you know what they say, you need to teach the man how to fish. If you teach the man how to fish, you solve his problem for life. If you give him fish, you have to give him fish till he dies. So we cannot continue this model whereby, we're giving handouts to persons with disability. The question is for how long? Because then they're not productive to themselves, they're not productive to the society at large. So we're shutting them out.
Thank you. So thank you for touching on that conversation. So we'll be moving a bit. So person with disability, a youth has, just like everybody and everybody literally, we have spheres of our life. We have our employment, we have our social life, we have civic engagement, we have our relationship and intimacy. So we'll do a bit of digression into all of this as it affects youth with disability. So now we're moving on to formal employment. So I want to start off with this. So before we start this conversation, something really jumped at me. And it was a tweet that I saw, I think about February, of a girl who has cerebral palsy. And she was just randomly giving her feedback about how it's really difficult getting a job and holding a job here in Ibadan where she stays. So I'll just put it in that envelope. And she was saying how, so it's all good and rosy when she does her application online. So she sends in her application, they get back to her, she has an interview, it's all good until when they meet her in person, then she loses that job. And it's not just one, it's not just once it happened in 3 different occasions. So from that, she had always been of the opinion that people don't really need to know me by my disability first. It's what I can bring on board. But after this few cases, she had to change the scope to say, you know what, I'm a person living with disability, but these are the technical skills that I also have on board. So using this information, we've seen that it's quite difficult for persons with disability and youth with disability to get employment. So even when they get, to hold into that employment and not lose in that space. So I'd like to ask you, what are the strategies you recommend to ensure that youth with disability are able to fit into and to be inclusive in organizations? So I'll give you an example. We have a couple of multinationals that during the recruitment process, they already ask, are you a person with disability? And they ask that not, I would assume and I believe that the reason why they're asking is not to discard you, but it's to make provision readily available for you with disability. So I'm asking here now, what are your recommendations for corporate organizations, for individuals that happen to have that space to make that decision to ensure that persons with disability are included in the workforce?
So I think first of all, we need to broaden our recruitment processes. To a large extent, when recruiters are searching to fill vacancies, the last demographic that they think about are persons with disability. It starts from the advertisement process. Some people only advertise their job vacancies in print media. So if I'm visually impaired, automatically I'm shut out of that process because I do not even know that there's a recruitment going on. Some people only advertise on television and radio. if I'm hard of hearing, automatically I'm shut out of that recruitment process. I don't know that there's a recruitment going on, so I cannot partake in it because I've been shut out. So first of all, we need to broaden the recruitment process. One is the advertisement process. The advertisement processes need to be, more. It needs to be more accommodating for various spectrums of persons living with disability. That's first of all. Then the assessment process itself. I mean, thankfully now, COVID has shown us that a lot of things can be done online. So people do not need to go to assessment centers. You can do your assessment online. But before now, you might be the best in your field. Take, for example, you're a programmer, you understand, and you're looking for a job in one of the top IT firms in Nigeria. I don't want to name names, but let's just say one of the top IT firms in Nigeria who has their headquarters in Victoria Island or in Lekki. And you need to go for an interview and assessment. It has to, before now, it must be physical. You have to present yourself. Then there's a hurdle of getting from your house in maybe Abule Egba. You use a wheelchair and you need to get to VI. And you don't just need to get to VI, you need to get to VI before 8 o'clock in the morning when the process will take place. The thought of it is discouraging enough for you to say, you know what, I'll sit this one out. I'll look for one business center in the neighborhood that I can manage. Where if I wake up in the morning, I can manage myself and get there. After all, it's to sell time now, do photocopy and all those small things. So you're discouraged. You don't want to participate in the process because when the process was set up, you were not thought about. Nobody considered you when the assessment process was being set up. But thankfully now, a lot of organizations are beginning to understand that, a lot of all these things can be done remote. You do your test online. If you're competent, you do your assessment online. We'll do a Zoom call when we want to. We don't need to meet you in person, It's tasks and deliverables. And when you do our tasks and deliverables. But then again, like I said, it's the recruitment process. All these things have to play in the minds of the recruiters while the process is going on. And now that's one. Two, a lot of organizations need to come on board the Sustainable Developmental Goals 10, which is inclusion for everybody. Do you understand? They need to understand this and the advantages that it comes with. I was reading an article that made mention of how productivity is increased when you have persons with disability in your organization. And what came to my mind is how organizations tend to make life very easy for their executives. So they give them cars, they give them accommodation, they place their children on scholarships, they fly their children on holiday, health insurance and all these beautiful things. The end goal is to ensure that the organization hits its profit for the year. Now, if I'm reading articles that say that if you bring in persons with disability into your organization, it directly impacts on your profits and your revenues and your income, then why are recruiters and organizations not thinking that, we really need to get people with disability in our organization to boost this inclusivity that we keep talking about, to boost our productivity? And then the question now becomes, okay, so what do we need to do? What contingency plans do we need to make to get these people on board? But as it is at the moment, I do not think a lot of organizations are having that conversation. Sustainable Developmental Goal 1 states, the aim is to sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. And you agree with me that a lot of persons with disability make up a large percent of the bottom 40% of the population. Because as things stand at the moment, a lot of persons with disability cannot make enough income to sustain themselves, let alone sustain a family. So I think these are the two things I will just touch on when we talk about employment. And as it is in Nigeria today, I mean, for the benefit of those listening, a lot of organizations still discriminate against persons with disability. I had a personal experience in 2019. It's repeating itself now. I just moved cities from Lagos to Abuja, and it's repeating itself again. What happened? Like I said at the introduction, I drive for one of the e-taxi hailing services. In 2019, I renewed my driver's license. The moment they saw that my license was for persons with disability, they made me understand that their system does not accept persons with disability driving on their platform. It took them almost 7 months to rectify that in Lagos. Now I have moved cities. I am in Abuja. I switched my city. I had to go through this whole process of, reapplying again. I submitted my document, and the feedback is that my driver's license does not give me the right to drive the type of vehicle that is on my platform, which is funny because I have a history of driving on the platform. It's now, it's funny because it is not a question of competence. Because if it's a question of competence, I have a history already that shows that I can do the job. It is now a question of their systems not recognizing that this person should be accommodated on the platform.
Absolutely.
So those are some of the things that we experience today as a person with disability that shut us out of a lot of things. And that's why you see persons with disability having dependence till they grow grey and they eventually die.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. And I absolutely agree with you. At the IREDE Foundation, we've been in that position where we interact with youths and adults, and on an average, you ask them, what do you do? There's really no formal employment that they are doing. It's either they had, just like you said, working in business center, or they had to create something for themselves. But another important thing that I want to connect to was that part where skills as acquisition. So it's like taking the bull by the horn. I mean, it's sad enough that the society is not prepared for persons with disability. But the question again, we also need to ask is, persons with disability, what are they doing differently to ensure they are? And I'll say this because, and I'll still connect it back to the charity model. So you see an adult or a person with disability who automatically is entitled to support. So whether it's money, whether it's food, because from the get-go, the society has seen them in that way, and they feel that's the best way they can live their life by getting that support. But I also want to also acknowledge those people who take it by their own. So I want to refer to, there's this young girl who finished from last week. She studied biology, I think something related to the sciences. Then all of a sudden she lost her auditory ability to hear, just out of the blues. And then she thought through and said, you know, what she was studying would need interaction. And she had seen that there's this gap already. So she always have to have a sign language interaction. She had seen those gaps, and she just had to do a purposeful change in career to tech. And when they asked her why the change in tech, she said because she's just interacting with her laptop. Or even if she has to interact with a colleague, you can go on chat. So you see that's a deliberate act to switch things to your favor. So I'm just using also this medium to call out to persons with disability that you have your role to play. Enough of it, we moved past the charity approach. People should not keep dashing you handouts. You need to go for it. You want this role, you go for it. I mean, look at you saying that. I mean, after the situation that happened in Lagos, you're still working. And this is you now in Abuja because you want it and you are going for it. So I'm just using this approach to say, you know what?
But let me just to kind of add to what you're talking about.
Okay.
Some of us in the disability space are quite privileged. My disability. Some of us in the disability space are quite privileged. I was privileged enough to have my amputation after I had gone through my educational process. So it's easy for me to say, and the example that you just made, for her to say, you know what, I can switch because you've already attained a certain level of knowledge. So it's easy for you to wake up and say, okay, you know what, and I used to struggle with this when I first got amputated. So I'll get to traffic and I'm stuck in traffic, I'm driving, and somebody in a similar condition as myself would walk up to my car and knock on my window and is asking for, you know, alms. And I'll get infuriated and say, I get one like you now, why they disturb me? Go and get something to do, you know, go work, go find work. But on the other hand, that's all he's known all his life. The young chap probably has never written ABCD before. He doesn't know how to spell. He doesn't even know how to write his name. So how would I expect that all of a sudden he will just think that, okay, I need to do something from now and I need to learn to drive a bus? You know, it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes those people in that category need to be thought about and need to be thoughtful. You know, to say that, okay, you know what, if you fall in category, what can we genuinely do for you to change your life such that you're independent and you're not living off arms or waiting for people to give you handouts before you can live your life. So while we encourage people in certain positions of privilege, you know, to take the bull by the horn and say, you know what, I need to do this for myself and I need to do this for myself. Conversely, we need to look at people who are not so privileged and say what structures need to be put in place so that they can be on the same pedestal as or close to the same pedestal as people who share a certain level of privilege.
Thank you for that perspective. Thank you so much for that perspective. Okay, so we're moving on to disability inclusion in media and the entertainment industry. Now, media is a huge driving force for representation, and I say this because, and I'll give you an example. So I understood more about cerebral palsy by watching a series. I understood more about autism by watching a series because I could place it these individuals, and that's the power of media and this and representation basically. So I just want to and also in line with that, interesting. There's this Nigerian movie, I think God Calling, where all of a sudden we just saw R&D, that's Richard Ufedamijo with a prosthetic limb. I saw that conversation on Twitter, so I was excited. I'm like, okay, because if you really look at it, it was really uncalled for. But I like the representation that happened. So what's your thoughts about the importance of representation of persons with disability in the media space?
I think there's improvement coming from how it used to be. Before, we didn't even used to see persons with a disability on our screens. You understand? It was almost impossible to think that somebody with a disability could live an independent quality life because you never see them. The only time you see persons with disability in Nigeria is in traffic begging for alms. Yeah. So for the longest, growing up in Nigeria as a child, you see them as people who do not add value to society. So you almost wish that you do not fall into that category because there are not many persons in the disability space who are role models today. And why is it like that? Because they are not given the required visibility. In a lot of the events that happen around the entertainment space, from awards and movie premieres, you never see a person with disability on the red carpet taking pictures with your celebrity stars. It's the regular faces, the regular people, doing what they need to do to promote their movie. But things are getting better. And I say things are getting better because a few years ago, MTN did an advert where the lead character was a blind bride. Yeah. And it was warming to the heart because it shows, they try to make people understand that this set of people exist. And for me, it was one of the best adverts that I have seen.
Yeah, it was. Network. Is this ours or his? Is this our network? Is that okay? Is this network?
What we're seeing now is that the advert which they placed on Big Brother Nigeria, there was a gentleman that has a very similar disability with myself. So I particularly like that advert because he was washing a car, then he got via the Abeg app, he got money and he went to see his prosthesis to make him a prosthetic limb. And I was very, very happy about that. I was like, wow. So, I mean, they're including us now in all these things. People are beginning to talk about us. We're not invisible anymore, So it is not where it needs to be. But we need to give kudos to those who have started that conversation and encourage them to continue to do more. Equally, I think what those of us in the NGO space can do is to reach out to people in entertainment. Say, for example, the big stars, the Davidos, the Banky W's, the Wizkids, the Burna Boys, is to reach out to them and say, okay, when you want to do your music video, we have Star Girl Beulah in the foundation that can be your lead dancer. She dances fantastically, and send them a snippet to say, you know what, in your next video, we would appreciate if you can be more inclusive and if you can do this for us. Do you understand? And have a person with disability. I know they currently do a lot for persons with disability, I know, but I feel that we can still drive that conversation to make them do more.
Okay, absolutely. I picked up on something you talked about, showcasing. So you made reference to we're not seeing people on the big screen with disability and all. And I think that's one of the things we also observed at the foundation. Hence why we did this mentorship kind of program where, and I know you can bear witness to that, where we connect the children with adults living with disabilities to see that, hey, you have people who are living with disability and doing exceedingly well in their sphere. So there's more like a mentorship gap that's happening there. So it's an ongoing conversation, and I like the fact that I said NGOs can actually reach out to them to project it more from their end. Thank you for that. So moving on to relationship and intimacy. So, okay. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm with you.
Is it you? Is it there? Hi, Iwi. Oh, we're frozen. Ah.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello, Iwi. Can you hear me? Am I still frozen? Whoa. No, I wanted to check network. Iwi, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Internet will disappoint you.
I
Am I back? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Huh.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. So we're back.
All right, cool.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Okay. So we're moving
All right,
on
cool.
to, thank you, Crystal. So moving on to intimacy and relation. So before I ask you this question, so I want to refer to a project that is ongoing at the foundation. So last month we kicked off a survey project to understand the knowledge, the attitude, and behavior of persons towards persons with disability, and it covered a whole range of things. Currently, now we have about 140 respondents, and we're still looking at having 800 more. But there was something that really jumped out while I was working on. Okay, what's it again? Who is frozen now? Me. Okay, we will join back soon. Okay, so Iwi dropped. So while am I still on? Okay. So while we try to get Iwi back, thank you for still staying in. So I'm about to add him back. Okay, while he's joining, Crystal says both of us. Am I on? Yeah, this evening. Okay.
Hello.
Iwi, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just pick up again. So I was referring to but we're about to talk about relationship and intimacy, and I was referring to the ongoing survey that we are collecting data on to provide a fact sheet for further advocacy. And there was this part where we asked questions about intimacy and relationship, and there were diverse questions. But there was this particular one, and I will just read it out exactly how it is. So we asked that, how do you feel adults with disabilities should not have the same rights to fulfill their sexual relationship as everyone? As of now, we figured that 49% of these respondents said they don't think that adults with disability should have sexual relationship or intimacy. And their reason actually was based on the fear of being abused. And it's valid as far as I'm concerned. I mean, even we with persons without disability have that concerns of abuse of all kinds. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts around this. So beyond even this, just what's your overview regarding person with disability and relationship with intimacy? What has been your experience?
So, while I agree that it is a very valid concern, I mean, like you've mentioned, even persons without a disability suffer from various forms of abuse, both physical and emotional abuse. So it is very valid when you now bring it into the disability space and have that conversation. However, it is not enough reason to shut them out entirely from having sexual relationships and intimacy and all of that, because I say this because human beings will be human beings. It is not by shutting them out that you're protecting them. It is by helping them make informed decisions so that they do not fall victims of people who have abusive tendencies. So it is probably to guide them as opposed to shutting them out. I understand where the concern is coming from, in the sense that, if you can't fight for you can't defend yourself. what then happens if your partner becomes physically abusive? You know, what do you do? How do you go about it? And all of that. Yes, that is a very valid concern. But the solution is not to say, you know what, because there are people out there who will now say persons living with a disability do not have a right or to have sexual relations. I mean, that would be an extreme solution. That would be throwing away the baby and the bathwater. What we would need to do is to help persons living with disability find partners who are empathetic, who are reasonable, who are loving, caring, understand their disability, and can spend the rest of their lives with them. So I think that's the right direction to go, not a case of, you know what, because people are abusive. Come on now. So, man or marry? I don't understand. If you don't want me to have a wife, man or board. You know, so yeah, that's my contribution to that, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So allow me also to shed more light on these numbers. So when I saw this number, I read more. So I was trying to understand this perception. Why is that? Then I came across a report that had been done, which focused on women and girls with disability and gender-based violence, rather, and how prominent it is within that space. And they had a survey that covered about 700 women, and of these 700, 363 said that they've been sexually abused. And it's from people, and honestly, these numbers are it's still the same thing even outside the community.
The disability space.
But the focus here was just seeing how there was an instance of a woman who says she used a wheelchair, and so her husband punishes her by taking the wheelchair from her because of her disability. So it's just the power play, power tussle. Okay, this is what you rely on for access, so I'm going to take it away from you. Or in some cases, partners taking their partner's prosthetic limb and allowing them to crawl or hop to come and meet them, which is quite derogatory. So it's happening in the community, it's happening in that space, and it's also important that we talk about it within us and see what solutions we can make to make provisions for that. So we've addressed our major conversations today, but I just wanted to ask you, we're living today, what are two things you are living for persons with disability and for the general community?
For persons with disability, because today we're talking about transforming food systems, I'll try to encourage persons to look for knowledge, be intentional about knowledge and skills, acquire knowledge, search for skill sets, develop yourself. Do not let your disability be a hindrance to you gaining knowledge. Thankfully, the internet is available to everybody. Use the tools available to you to gain knowledge. Because once you're knowledgeable about the subject matter and you're grounded in your field, you will be sought after. And what that means is that you'll be well remunerated for that skill set. And when you're well remunerated for your skill set, you can go ahead to live an independent quality life. So that is my charge to youths with a disability today. Acquire knowledge as much as you can, acquire knowledge, develop yourself, gain skills as much as possible. Now, I mean, IT is the next big thing. You can become a developer, even if your lower limbs have been amputated. You can start developing softwares and solving solutions via tech and all these things. So look for a niche, or look for a place where you feel that you can progress and prosper, gain the necessary access to break into that job market, and then the sky is the limit for you. So that's my charge for persons with disability. For everybody else, we need to be more inclusive. For the employers of labor, you need to beam your searchlights on this very small demographic in the grand scheme of things. I know it's difficult now, especially with the way the unemployment numbers are going in Nigeria. A lot of employers are, it's shrinking by the day. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, you need to do this and do that. But I understand that, profit margins are thinning out by the day. Recruiters are having a hard time. So if I'm telling them to come and add this to the problem they have on their plate, it might feel like we are being inconsiderate. But then again, we have to say it, and it has to be done. If not now, put it in your long-term plan. Going forward, you have to put things in place to have, let's start by saying for every organization, 1% of your workforce has to be persons with disability. Let's start from there, and then we can then scale up, and it's from there that we can actually this conversation about inclusivity. It is from there that we can actually genuinely move forward, because when people without a disability wake up every day to interact with a person with disability, then they can share his pain or her pain, they can understand his needs or her needs, and then they can look for solutions around the needs of that person. But if you go to work every day, you do not encounter a person with disability. You go to church or the mosque every day, you do not encounter a person with disability. You go for your Owambe parties every day, you do not encounter a person with disability. You go to the bank, you do not encounter a person with disability. The question is simple. How do you then feel their pain? How do you empathize? How do you sympathize? So I would say, you know what, let's start from saying, okay, let's charge organizations to say 1% of your workforce has to be someone with a disability or persons living with disability. That would be my charge to those without a disability and employers of labor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So for people that have been joining in, thank you so much for joining in. Thank you for staying through. This chat would be saved, and you can always access it and talk about it and refer this video later on. And I also want to encourage you to please go to our bio and participate in the survey that's ongoing. We really want to understand your perception about this. And the main reason for this is that we want to have further conversations. We want to enlighten you. We want to change your thinking about several things. We want to ensure that behavior towards persons with disability changes. And we can only do this by having objective numbers, objective feedback. And please, I encourage you to go to our bio and check for the link that takes you to the survey. It's the knowledge, attitude, and behavior towards persons with disability survey. Thank you so much, Iwi, once again. Thank you for
having me.
Us through this. Thank you for always being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Where do I end it though? Edwin, please help me. Help me end. What do I say to edit?
Have you ended it?
I'm not still. I need to edit. What do I say to it? Oh, okay.
Like I was just downstairs. I was with you. The next thing.
Okay.